All right. So yeah, thanks for doing this interview, Matt.
Sure.
How did you get involved in Maine Rivers?
Well, I moved up to Maine back for a couple of years back in 2011, 2012, and then I moved back permanently in 2015. And in that time, I got involved with Trout Unlimited, did a bunch of volunteer work for them, and did some paid projects for them as well. And when this opening came up, the chapter president of Trout Unlimited recognized that it would be a good fit for my skill set. And so he recommended me to Maine Rivers as a candidate.
Okay. And how long have you been with them now?
Since 2016, May of 2016, I think.
Okay. So is the China Lake project, is that your first project working with them, or?
Yes. I was hired as a project manager for the China Lake project.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so can you describe how you went about deciding whether to remove a dam or install a fishway on the outlet stream? Like, what kind of considerations go into each project, and how much does working with the owner of that dam go into deciding that process?
Well, the ultimate decision belongs to the owner of the dam.
Mhm.
Right? We can't, we don't get to choose whether it's a dam removal or a fishway project. Now, for ecological purposes, dam removal is almost always the better choice. If your only consideration is the number of alewives that are going to get through there, the restoration of the stream channel to its natural flow, the restoration of the riparian buffer, the restoration of kind of oxygen, temperature, sediment, and woody debris transport, all of which are really important ecological functions within a stream. Then if that were your only consideration, then every dam would be a removal. But some of the projects we did, one of the ones in North Vassalboro is holding back a pond that's heavily used by local people, especially kids, for a swimming hole and paddling and fishing. It's we really didn't want to take away that community resource, and more importantly, the property owner didn't want to take away that community resource. And likewise with the other dam in North Vassalboro next to the mill. It provides beautiful backdrop for wedding photographs and graduation photographs and things like that. And that was really important to the property owner. So on those, we did fishways. And at China Lake, of course, we don't want to lower the lake level by 4 feet, which would be the effect of taking out the dam there. That would not be very popular. So, so those are the reasons why we chose fishways where we chose fishways. The other ones were dam removals because we had the approval of the property owner to remove the dam.
Okay, so what kind of considerations went into building the box mill and Lad Dam? Like, can you describe the process you guys went through from start to finish? Just kind of a little overview.
Sure. I mean, every one of these projects kind of has a number of stages. In fact, I was looking at I have a little outline for myself that I wrote up at one point, because it's not that many things, maybe a dozen steps, but each project, whether it's a dam removal or a fishway construction, goes through the same steps. And they are, first of all, you get the agreement of the property owner on the concept, like the broad picture of what you're doing, whether it's going to be a dam removal or a fishway, general criteria. Then you get what's called a conceptual design, which is done, in our case, all the conceptual designs for our projects were done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they did a lot of the hydraulic and hydrologic studies and you know, the studies of the terrain and the surveying and stuff like that, that would allow basic decisions about the location of a fishway or exactly how the dam would be removed. Any of those things are worked out in advance in broad strokes by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a huge help because we don't have to pay an engineer to do that. It's part of their service. So, but you take that conceptual design back to the property owner, make sure they're in accord with it. You take that back to all of our other partners in the projects and make sure everybody's in agreement with the conceptual design. A lot of our project partners are represented by engineers. So the Sebastopol Regional Land Trust is a real important project partner, and 2 of their board members are on our list of project partners. Are both one's an engineer and one's a fisheries biologist. So we get all that review done on the conceptual design, and then that information moves on to final engineering process. So we hire an engineering firm, and they take the conceptual design. They have to validate all the elevations and things like that, but they basically take the conceptual design and turn that into detailed construction ready drawings with all the details and set of technical specifications for the contractor that's ready to bid. So a full set of documents that are ready to go to bid to a contractor. I mean, the documents end up being like 400 pages long. A lot of it's really standard stuff, but the engineer has to put that together, make sure it all makes sense, and provide the detailed drawings for the contractor to follow. And then we go to bid to the construction contractor. We hire a construction contractor, vet that person, vet that company, get approval from our project partners who are all very familiar with this process, many of them. And then we hire the construction contractor. And well, somewhere in there, I guess, before you go to construction bidding, there are 2 stages that are kind of outside of the direct line of the construction process. And one is fundraising, which really starts about 2 years before the project. Landis did the bulk of that. I got involved in a couple of grant writing activities on fundraising, but you really have to, because the federal and state agencies, the private foundations, all the different sources of funding that you have cycles. You don't just show up and ask for money and they give you a check. They have an application due April 15th, right? And so you get it in by April 15th and they give you a decision by September 1st. Okay. So just even in the shortest amount of time conceivable, fundraising would take a full year because of those schedules, not because the actual fundraising takes that much time. So fundraising is obviously a really important part of the project. You can't pay anybody unless you got the funds. So and the other part that's not directly in line with the construction sequence is permitting. And we needed to get Maine Department of Environmental Protection permits, the NERPA permit, Natural Resources Protection Act permit for each of these projects, and a Army Corps of Engineers general permit for each of these projects. And some of them required the local shoreland zoning permits as well. So the whole permitting process takes, count 4 to 6 months to get that done. Wow. Because again, there are delays in there. Once you get your permit in, the agency has 60 days to turn it around for a decision. So you've got to have at least 2 months just waiting for the decision. Mm-hmm. And then once you get the decision, then you can get started. But so the permitting is a whole process. And then of course you go to construction bidding, construction. And on most of these projects, the construction has been 8 to 10 weeks during the summer. It's got to take place between July 15th and September 30th because that's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requirement of in-stream work, so that it does the minimum amount of disturbance to the species and the ecology of the stream during those low flow summer months when there's little spawning activity and stuff like that going on. So so these construction projects each took about 8 to 10 weeks in that summer timeframe. And then after that, there's always monitoring and management afterwards. Make sure, for example, especially in the case of a fishway, we will be monitoring at outlet. We're going to have an electronic counter counting how many alewives actually get into the lake. And at the other dams, we'll be monitoring the success rate of the alewives getting up through the fishway. Obviously, you've got a fishway, it's not a natural structure. You're not going to get 100% of the fish through there. It's going to be some percentage of that, maybe 95, maybe 90, 80, 60. In some situations, 60 is a pretty good number.
Oh,
We're
wow.
shooting for over 90% at each one of these sites because it's a relatively narrow stream. You can really direct most of the flow through the fishway, and the fish are basically going to follow the flow.
Mhm.
And so I think we can get 90% or better on the 3 fishways that we've got here, which is another reason why you go for dam removal rather than fishways, because even at 90%, you're still losing 30% of your fish through the process. And those fish are basically turn around and go back out to the ocean if they can't make it up one of the fishways. They turn around and go back out to the ocean and try again next year, basically, as long as they survive. So the monitoring and kind of management of the fishways is an ongoing thing, especially management. They've got to be one of the things when you build a fishway instead of taking out a dam is that whoever owns the fishway has the responsibility of managing it from there forward. And we provided some funds for replacement baffles and things like that. But basically the owner of the fishway is in significant part responsible for making that fishway operates, and in conjunction with the Department of Marine Resources.
Mhm. I'm sure anytime you have, like in the spring when there's a lot of snow melt after rains and stuff like that, there has to be some, is there adjustments that you have to do at those times for fishways? Just to make sure that the fish can continually make it up the ladder?
Yeah, I mean, there are some
Baffling.
tweaks. There are some tweaks with the fishways. You can control the elevation of the water going into the fishway. And you might do that. I think in the initial phases, we'll probably tweak that a fair bit in the first couple of years. And then once we get a basic setup that works, it'll stay more or less that way. Once you kind of find everything, in theory, you could build the fishway at just the right elevation for the average year,
Mhm.
for the mean or whatever, and then you would kind of set it and forget it. But we've got adjustment baffles that can adjust the water elevation. Essentially, it adjusts the water elevation in the impoundment behind it, and by doing that, it will affect the amount of water flowing through the fishway.
Mhm. Okay.
Mhm.
So what are some of the other project partners that you work with besides Department of Marine Resources? You mentioned Fish and Wildlife Services. You mentioned them, Sebasticook.
Yeah. Well, so the Maine Department of Marine Resources, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, has been a major partner. Sebasticook Regional Land Trust, China Lake Association, and China Region Lakes Association.
Mhm.
Well, let me think. I think those are the ones that we've been working on. Those are all the ones, I think they're all the ones that we've been working on from the very beginning of this effort and continue to work with them. And then there are many funders and other people have come and gone to help in certain areas, but those are kind of the central partners.
Okay. So to switch it back, how was the order of dam work on the outlet stream decided? Like, how did you decide where to start and where to end?
Well, I saw something, I think it was a post on Facebook or something that made it sound like that this was a very sophisticated decision, but in reality, it was just the logistics of the construction process. Which owners were ready with approval first, which there was one consideration, which was before we did a survey for endangered species, which the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service conducted, we thought it was possible that the habitat below Box Mill Dam would be considered Atlantic salmon habitat. And if that were the case, then we would want to do Box Mill last. And so that was the original plan. But after surveying, we determined that there was no real current Atlantic salmon habitat in the watershed. Doesn't mean there won't be in the future, but for now, it's not there, mainly because of the temperatures in the stream. So that was the only constraint on the order. So in reality, the order was entirely a result of which project was ready to go first and the order in which the projects were ready to go. And that was mostly a function of discussions with the property owner, getting the plans. And you can only do so much at once. So we kind of did them at a rate of about one project per year. This year, we're doing 2 projects.
Okay. Was the outlet dam reserved for last for a reason, or was that, I mean, just like you said, that was just kind of the way it happened?
Yeah, because there was a little bit more time required to get approval for that, because we had to get the select board approval, and there had to be a vote of the whole town on a warrant to approve it as well. So just getting that warrant done, it only happens once a year, right? So that's effectively a whole year. Yeah, because once the town warrant was approved, then we really had to start everything else. So but there is something of a public relations reason to do outlet last, because this year we had a whole bunch of fish there stacking up behind the dam. I don't know if you noticed, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think that the public there would be a public perception that there's something really wrong with that if it happened year after year. In fact, it's been happening down at Box Mill every year for the last 4 or 5 years. It's just that that's the fish will stop and stack up wherever they can't get past. So right now that last obstacle is really the outlet dam.
Yeah. And you all have started that work this year, or you will start that work this year?
Yeah, in fact, just I think it was yesterday that contractors removed the trees from the area that's going to be the construction area, trees and shrubs and vegetation, so that they can get started. I don't have an exact start date for that, but it'll be in the next couple of weeks. They are, just like all construction projects right now, materials are kind of a big challenge, and they're in line to get their rebar order filled. And once their rebar is available and ready to be shipped on site, then they'll have a schedule.
Yep. Okay. So what kind of ladder is going to go in at the outlet dam?
So the construction will be very similar to what is at Box Mill and Ladd, the basic construction, but it's only going to be about half as large, because the elevation change there is really less than almost a third of the elevation change at Ladd and Box Mill. But it'll be a concrete, essentially a concrete channel that goes around the east bank, which is the bank near the Cates farm, adjacent to the Cates farm. All the construction equipment will be coming across the Cates family farm to get to the site, and they've given us permission for that. They've been very, very helpful and cooperative on that. So it's going to be like a concrete channel that if you're swimming upstream with the alewives will be on the left. And the alewives will swim up there. There'll be a 90-degree turn kind of once it gets beyond the end of the dam. Of course, the dam goes into the bank by 30 or 40 feet. Because you can't just stop it at the edge of the bank. And then it'll go upstream and straight into the lake up above the stream.
Okay. And those are Alaskan steep passes? Is that what those are?
No,
Denial?
no, those are Denial style fish.
Denial. Okay.
Yeah. Alaskan steep pass is what they've got over at Weber Pond.
Okay.
They look fairly similar to the untrained eye, but the Denial fishway is for larger volumes and a little bit less steep. For if you're going to be trying to get 1 million fish through a fishway, you got to make the experience as smooth as possible for the alewife.
Mm-hmm. And for other fish too, it's not just alewives you're considering. There's other fish that can use these ladders.
Yeah, they'll generally only be operational really, or we're only going to be actively operating and managing them during the alewife run. But it is alewives, blueback herring, which are another river herring species that we have, of which we have quite a few in this China Lake watershed. The only difference, the main difference between the alewives and blueback herring is that the blueback herring tend to spawn in the streams and the alewives tend to spawn in the lakes. But it'll be alewives, blueback herring, eels have been using the fishways down below, and that's really great to see. In this area, the only other thing that will use them, white suckers, which is a native resident fish in the system, will be able to use it, and they'll swim upstream to spawn just like brook trout do, but suckers do it in the spring. Brook trout conceivably could use it, although I don't think there's a real resident brook trout population in the stream right now. Although there could be in some of those tributaries like Red Brook.
Okay.
And with the dam removals that we did, the stream is returning to more natural state. So you might find there's some native brook trout in there, but brook trout and brown trout will fall over the dam into the stream. And so those fish, when the stream starts warming up, they might swim back up and try and get into the depths of the lake again. So any fish can use it. There is going to be a block at the first dam to help prevent invasive fish like northern pike and certain catfish species and carp. I forget exactly what they are, but larger, broader headed fish won't be able to get up through there.
Okay.
And we'll be monitoring for that. We don't really think it's a big risk because there's a stretch of river, there's a stretch of stream below the Box Mill Dam that is really not appropriate for those fish. That wouldn't generally come up this kind of shallow, rocky, freestone stream. But we'll be on the lookout for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of work goes into making sure that the fish can go up the ladder. Like what kind of considerations go into the fish that are coming back after?
Oh yeah, a very, very important factor there. U.S. Fish and Wildlife standards are that there be a dedicated or an intentional anyway plan for fish returning downstream. At some places they send the fish back down through the fishway, but if you can help it, the design for a downstream fishway is a little bit different than an upstream fishway. And so at each one of these sites, we have a dedicated chute of some kind that's going to transport the fish downstream. And effectively what it is it's kind of a relatively narrow, relatively, it's maybe 3 feet wide and a foot deep. And so the goal is that it kind of shoots a steady, solid stream of water down into the plunge pool below the dam. And if a fish gets entrained in that solid block of water, then the fish can make that trip from the top of the dam down into the plunge pool without feeling any injury or any problem at all. So at each location, we've followed the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service specifications for downstream fish passage, and we'll monitor that very closely as well to make sure that the fish are navigating downstream safely.
Okay. Are there any notable moments you could share for us, kind of working on this project and the time you've been involved? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Massey Dam removal was the big moment for me. That was the first of the sites that we did, and when the dam came out and the water started flowing naturally through there, and the stream very rapidly started to follow a natural kind of curve through what was the impoundment, that was the most exciting moment for me.
Okay.
Since then, it's recovered. There's this beautiful riparian habitat. There are trees and wildflowers growing on the bank. We're still managing it for invasive species, and every year we're going out there and planting more native plants and removing invasive plants to try and get that whole riparian area back in balance. But
And you've done a lot of work with the school, getting kids out there. We saw doing wildflowers and things like that.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun too. So we've, until last year with COVID, we didn't do it, but the previous 4 or 5 years, we went out every year to the Vassalboro in China 5th and 6th grade science classes. We spent a day out there doing every class, and in each class we did a little presentation on alewives, on the history of the stream and the sites and the dams, on native plants versus invasive plants. And then we got all the kids, each kid got 2 little 4-inch plastic plant pots filled with soil, and they got a bunch of seeds, and they sowed the seeds in the soil, and then those went out into the yard of the school because they just sit out over winter because they're native seeds. That's the best thing to do with them, is put them out in the cold for the winter. And then in spring they'd start sprouting, and the following fall we try and bring the same class back to go out on site and plant their native wildflowers and native shrubs and things out on the site. So that's been a lot of fun. The kids get a big kick out of it, and they get a day out in the fresh air. And so that's been, we'll be picking that up again this year, but last year we put a pause on that.
Okay. So what will be your all involvement in this project after this year, once the outlet is complete, once you're done with how do you pronounce it, Morneo Dam, like that area? I think is the last 2 places you're working at? Or
Yep, Morneau and Outlet are both on the schedule for this year, as long as we can get it done. There's always, the Outlet is definitely happening. It's about to start. Morneau will be toward August or September, and that's a little more up in the air depending on availability of materials and stuff like that. At Morneau, we're removing the dam, but we're also building a bridge there to provide a wider stream, because the bridge pinches the stream there and it makes fish passage more difficult.
Okay.
So that's where otherwise there wouldn't be a materials cost, but as long as materials and labor are still manageable by August or September, then we'll get the Morneau Dam out. And then all the dams will be taken care of. After that, we still have follow-up because the grants that we got for all of the dam removals included the revegetation of the riparian buffer. And so some of that revegetation work and some of that invasive plant removal work will be ongoing for at least another 3 years. But mostly will be done. After that, it'll be monitoring the success of the run and monitoring to make sure that the fishways are operating correctly.
Okay. Is there any way volunteers from Vassalboro can get involved in this type of thing? I've had some people ask if there's any way they can get involved in these projects or.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing that will be happening in the future that hasn't really started yet is going to be the alewife counts at the fishways. So the one at Outlet will have an electronic counter, but I think they will also need people to go and count just to validate the counter. And typically what I think happens there is people go and count for a half hour, sit there at the dam and with a little clicker and try and count all the alewives that pass for a half hour. And we may be doing, at least in the beginning, we'll be doing the same thing at the Box Mill and Outlet fishways, just to get some kind of validation of how successfully those fishways are passing fish. If a manual count isn't sufficient for that, we may end up doing electronic counts down there as well. But at least initially it'll be manual counts at those sites. So that's an area where we can use some help. Invasive plant removals over at the sites where there are where we're going to be removing plants. I may do at Massey for a couple of years. We did invasive plant removal days with the Sebasticook Regional Land Trust. They have a whole crew that does nothing. I mean, not nothing. They're volunteers, but they go out and they do all the invasive plant removals at the Sebasticook Regional Land Trust sites. So typically there's one day a year when they come on site and we get a bunch of invasive shrubs and things removed. And we'll probably continue that, and that would be an area where the public would be very welcome at helping. So
okay, do you all do like invitation type deals then, or is there a way people can should we just reach out to Maine Rivers, or is there another way to do that? Or
yeah, I would say reach out to Maine Rivers.
okay.
It would be this year. I don't think we'll be doing it, but next year we'll probably have at least one invasive removal day. And if we have a bunch of volunteers, we might do 2 or 3 days and stagger it out, because the invasive plant removal is just plain old manual labor.
Right.
So the more people you got, the more you can do, as long as you can coordinate them in some way.
But with the counters, it'll be the same thing.
With the counters, reach out to Maine Rivers. It'll be under the direction of the DMR, but Maine Rivers will coordinate that.
Okay. Was there anything else you'd like to share about the projects, or anything I missed here?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's been extraordinary, the cooperation and the help that we've gotten from the town. A lot of it is because the town has already had a good experience with the Weber Pond fishway, and a lot of what happens in a lot of places is there's kind of misinformation floated around about what alewives do. The idea that they harm the bass population in the lake, or that they, increase or decrease the water quality, which is the opposite experience of most places. Most places they really are good bass food. So all of the sport fish in the lake should be very happy about the alewives. And certainly in Weber Pond and in every place that I'm aware of, the practical result has been on an anecdotal basis. There haven't been like thorough peer-reviewed studies or anything, but on a purely practical ground level basis, the result in every case has been, that I'm aware of, has been a reduction in or an increase in water clarity, which is a big issue in China Lake. And we expect there to be an improvement in water clarity in China Lake as a result of this. You can't prove it until it happens because there are a lot of factors that go into that. And there are ways to tinker with the numbers eventually if you're not getting the water clarity improvement that you want, if you let more or fewer fish into the lake. But it's a little bit of a trial and error thing. And but certainly Weber Pond is an experience where steadily year in and year out, their water quality has improved since the alewives have been reintroduced. And again, that's the experience that every lake association that I've heard of has had. I fully expect that to be the case with China Lake. Does it come out?
Oop. That was weird.
The number that come out will be in the billions, the juveniles. And then, of course, the vast majority of them get eaten out in the ocean or on the way to the ocean. But they'll start coming back. If you get 150,000 in the lake in 2022, their offspring will be coming back in 2026. So between 2022 and 2026, you really won't see that big jump up, right? You'll see more or less the returns from the last couple of years of stocking. So you'll be seeing the returns from 20 to 25,000 stocked fish. And then in 2026, you'll get the first return of that, say call it 150,000 fish. And that's when you'll start seeing really large numbers. And in 2026, 27, 28, 29, you probably go 6-7 years from that point before the numbers build up to max out the carrying capacity of the lake.
Okay. If things carry on as they are now without any other changes or anything else, I don't know, because you hear about like the bycatch regulations and stuff like that. And I mean, you hear about Maine being really the only state that's doing so well with these kind of restoration processes. Like, you just wonder what it would take to kind of tip the balance to where it's not going so well up here, if there was anything that could happen.
You mean to where the alewife population started to decline again?
Yeah. I mean, what is what Maine doing? Could that sustain itself? I mean, beyond what is happening in the other states. I mean, how much does the fish populations that are coming up to Maine, how much does that make up like the whole of the entire population that's out there?
Well, and again, like to get the details of that, Nate Gray knows that a lot better. I mean, the natural range for alewives goes all the way down to Georgia, maybe northern Florida even. But Maine is the place where the most restoration work is being done and where the largest remaining population was to begin with. So with alewives, unlike Atlantic salmon are very tricky. We're not clear what's killing them off. Obviously dams, but aside from dams, there's still something going on in the ocean, so that the returns of numbers from the ocean back to the natal rivers for Atlantic salmon are not what they should be, and nobody really knows why that is. So that's kind of a complex picture. By contrast, for alewives and blueback herring, if you take a dam out and the fish can get there, if the fish are getting up to that dam, as soon as you take that dam out, they're going to go through there and they're going to go further up, and they are going to find spawning habitat, and they are going to eventually occupy the full niche where they belong. Alewives are they're just incredibly abundant. They're incredibly resilient. And if you give them access to spawning habitat, they will return and they will reproduce, and they'll eventually max out their population because there's only so much spawning area. But that's really what limits it. If you had, we got 4,000 acres in China Lake. If we had 8,000 acres, it'd be twice as many alewives. If we had 2,000 acres, it'd be half as many alewives, something like that. And they just come back and repopulate, and they are unbelievably resilient. They're kind of, I don't know if they're at the northern end of their range, but they're certainly not at the southern end of their range. So climate change should not impact their numbers dramatically, because they will be well in the center of their range, even if the temperature continues to go up. And yeah, the original question was, is there something that could slow down the restoration of the alewives? The only thing really that could slow it down is if people started building dams again.
Okay.
It's all about dams. It's all about dams, and to a lesser degree, road crossings like culverts.
Okay. But the more people see the success of these fish ladders, and maybe wildlife, other wildlife benefiting from this, and even
Yeah.
even the what do you call it? Once they can harvest fish, it's
Yeah.
of benefit to the town, things like that. Once people start to see that, then
Yeah.
more considerations will go into not building dams, or at least having some kind of fish passage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time you have a project like China Lake or Weber Pond, think about how important it was that Weber Pond was successful to the success of this project. The president of the Weber Pond Association was a huge advocate through the whole early years of kind of persuading landowners and persuading the town to approve all of this. The town was very favorable, because they've been making revenues from the Weber Pond harvest, and they know this harvest will be, I don't know, 3 or 4 times the size of that one.
Mhm.
So that kind of one project breeds success in all the subsequent projects, because all the people who are worried or concerned about the impact on bass can go to Weber Pond, and they can see that there's a very nice, healthy bass population there. It hasn't dropped off. The people who are concerned about water clarity can go to Weber Pond and see that the water clarity has, gotten better every year. China Lake, 10 years from now, will be a similar example. People can see that that this has been a success. People will start coming to watch the run. The kids love it. It's just an exciting thing. A lot of places have a festival around it. In my opinion, the old mill down there would be the perfect place to have a little festival every year. And so that every time you have a successful project like that, the word spreads wider and wider and wider, so that the next project in the next town, you'll be able to get it done, and there will be support among the public. The federal and state agencies are already very excited about these kinds of projects. All the funding sources are already very excited about these kinds of projects. So, and that was a whole process over, 20 years since the Edwards Dam came out, which is really kind of the watershed moment for this stuff. And longer than 20 years ago.
Yeah, 99. So
Yeah.
22.
Yeah. So that was really, if you think about between then and now, what has happened, people are aware of these migrating fish in the Kennebec. There are, I don't know what the numbers are, but you've got outside of Augusta, you can sit in a restaurant overlooking the river and see sturgeon jumping. Big, giant, 8-foot long sturgeon just jumping out of the water and slapping in the water. I mean, it's a totally new experience for this generation of people. 200 years ago, it was commonplace, right?
Mhm.
But people have totally forgotten about what it's like to have a healthy river ecosystem with all of the many different species of sea run fish coming back in abundance. And so once people have that feeling again, have that sensation and that experience of seeing it, I don't think anybody's going to go back to building dams.
Okay.
I just don't.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much for talking to me today, and I really appreciate it, Matt.
All right. Appreciate your efforts.
Yeah.